because if lifting of the arms and having the weight drop downward, that the capacity to discern it, the capacity to inhibit that which keeps you from it, I mean, those are all really high level skills already, right? So I'm delivering those ideas with ATMs, but normally they take a lot more. So another thing that people in general do, and that's what this morning's ATM is one of the many that I think addresses this, is that at a certain point, what happens is, I'm going to go through the part where already you need to counterbalance the weight of the arm, right? Well, I'll talk about that as well, but right now I'm going to ignore this part where the arm comes forward to shoulder height and then goes a little bit higher. Right? So what in general happens is then people run into lack of differentiation, which is using words but saying nothing at this point, right? Because differentiation makes, you can actually, we need differentiation for everything. So that would be the question. What is lacking that a person can no longer bring the arm up? So now I'm not talking about whether the arm feels heavy or light or is counterbalanced, but just the mechanical capacity to bring the arm up higher. And the only way that people can, and we all know this really well, so could you, thank you, hold the arm here so I can. So what people do, of course, is they lift the chest. Right? They lift the chest and they use extension. And then comes the question of what still has the mouth taped shut. I love it. So one option would be then to end up looking at the ceiling, but of course, in general, that's not what people do. They want to stay looking forward. So as there's extension in the lower thoracics, right, then there is a flexion that appears in the neck. Okay. So today's ATM is one that I find many applications for it into many, many themes. But I also find that it deals really directly with the capacity to leave leave the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis more neutral, so that when the arm goes up, there isn't an extension, right? But there also isn't an enforced flexion. So there's only one more thing I want to show about, thank you, let's put the skeleton back lying down. And we can if there are more questions about that later, well, we can go back to the skeleton or address them otherwise. But there's something that I want to bring up that I think will be a useful image for the start of the ATM. Yesterday, we had situations where one arm was up, the contralateral or the diagonal leg was bent, and we sometimes rolled, right? Rolled, or you sometimes rolled, and some of you rolled completely onto the side, and we were looking for that place where pelvis rolls less than the upper chest, which I, of course, can barely demonstrate over here, which puts I'm going to keep calling that a spiral, right, into the spine. Then there is, of course, pushing with the head staying on the floor. That is more of a diagonal push with very little of a lifting of that side of the pelvis. Mm-hmm. Right? And then there is what we're going to do in this ATM, which is that as you press lightly against the floor and lift, he keeps saying the hip joint. So lifting the hip joint could mean just rolling, hip joint lifts, right? Thing achieved. But if you think not so much of just the hip joint and the whole side of the pelvis lifting, but if we divide the pelvis in a way into 4 quarters, right, left and right, that's the half. And then there's the part below the hip joints, so that means the true part of the pelvis, and above the hip joint, the false part, pelvis. And if you think of lifting, let's say in this case, the lower left corner, and I hate to use the word corner because that implies a box, that implies sharp edges. So in general, what I try to do is I talk about the left lower parts of the pelvis or that sort of thing, and in such a way that this whole area on the contralateral side of the spine, so between the ilium and the 12th rib, which in all of these skeletons is much bigger than it actually is, and somehow these ribs, which in the lifting of the arm very often go forward, right, we're going to find how can this whole area drop back. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to take you through the whole ATM, because it will address, you'll find yourself very quickly looking to see whether this space increases when you bring an arm up. And then if it does increase, can you from below, without bringing in the flexors to push this lower back backward, but from below, in other words, from more of a seesaw effect. So if something goes up, something else will go down. Rather than, if something goes down, something goes up. Right? Because if you started from the point of bringing it down and using the flexors, then this will go up. Right? But this is saying, how can you somehow find a way of bringing this up so that this drops down? Because if it drops down, it can only drop down if somehow that inner intelligence sorts out how to inhibit the extensors. Right? So once we have that, then we say, okay, extensors inhibited to even a small degree. So now with the extensors inhibited, is it possible to bring the arm up without immediately evoking the extensors again? So we're looking at the kind of length through the system, so that if we return to our start from yesterday, which is what is, right? What is the, I'm going to keep using the word counterbalance because I haven't found another one, right? How can I stay long through myself and keep lifting the arm up and have, have the whole of me fluid enough to counterbalance that weight and to actually take it into the skeleton, rather than look to lift the arm by lifting something. Right? So it's a complete, in a way, reversal. I don't lift the arm by lifting, I let the arm lift by something dropping down, back, calibrating itself, keeping the neck free. It's big. It's really, really big. And then later today, just because she's filming, so you're filming, might as well have it all be as a cohesive bit. We're going to embrace another one of our strategies of working, which is depending on where your attention is, the experience of that which you do, right? The experience of the same action shifts, which means if the experience of the action shifts, that means that somehow the muscular mobilization for that action has changed.
Say that again.
Absolutely. So for instance, if somebody, may I use your nice green thing, whoever this is? Ooh, it's nice and heavy. That's great. Okay. So I'm going to imagine that I'm going to drink. So if I'm going to drink, my goal is not the elegant lifting of my arm where this flask ends up over there and I pour it on my head. It's like, oh, that felt really good, but it's in the wrong place. It's on my head and not in my mouth. So that's my goal, right? It's like, I'm thirsty, I'm really thirsty. I've run, I'm really thirsty. But if I actually begin to track, okay, where's my elbow in space when I lift that weight? If I just organize that action thinking more of the elbow, what difference does that make? In addition to everything else, because look, I can be so intent on this that I actually miss the whole point of the fact that, oh my God, now I've added weight into this arm, which means this lever, although not long, is actually, it's short, but it's heavier. So already I'm beginning to feel the tension in the back of my neck. So what can I do? Okay, I remember my heels, and I realize that I can have two attitudes in relation to this weight. One is, my whole self needs to hold this weight up. I'm exaggerating, right? So now I'm not talking about that it's just doing something with my ribs. I'm talking about the whole set of my system is, I'm holding it up. I'm holding it up, 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 and then upper, upper, higher, higher. Or, if I'm lifting this up, what goes down? Oh, there I am, down in my heels. Oh, the shoulder blades. I'm not pulling them down, I'm not taking them down, they drop down. And then if I add into that the thinking of my elbow, and wow, this is actually beginning to be kind of fun in almost like a hallucinatory way. This feels like the 70s again. Right? Oh. I actually had a colleague once brought his 17-year-old son in for an FI, and I gave this boy an FI, which is always a dubious thing when a parent or a spouse, sends somebody. And I know you said hi before, but I didn't really see your face, who you were. And the boy stood up afterwards and goes, wow, this is like dope. And I knew that was one of the issues that his father was having with him, so I looked him in the eye and said, and it's perfectly legal. I said, it might be a bit more expensive, so get your father to keep paying for it. But, right, there's something that, whatever it is that helped us in the 70s to kind of get more into our experience, right? To get more into experience. It's like, that's what it is. So that's what these shifts are. So if I just think about, and even here, it's like, what does the tip of my elbow have to do with the bottom of the flask? So, I mean, it's basically endless entertainment, which is, now it's beginning to feel, and based on recognizing, sensing, and discerning, right? Sensing that right now, my right thumb is beginning to feel stressed, although I have no troubles in my right thumb. My right hip joint is beginning to squeeze. So let's see, if I just do that, oh yeah, look, because then that took my weight again onto the right foot. Mm-hmm. And not only does that make my hip joint unsqueeze, but my elbow is more free, and now I can fully enjoy the water.